Just days after the top Republican in the Senate, Mitch McConnell, urged people to use the courts to hold Donald Trump accountable, it now appears that one prominent civil rights group is doing just that. The NAACP and Democratic Congressman Benny Thompson filed a federal lawsuit against former President Trump and his attorney Rudy Giuliani, accusing them of conspiring with white supremacist groups to stop Congress from certifying the election results. Here's what Thompson said about his lawsuit just in the last hour on this network.
This, hopefully, at the end, will mitigate any difference that we might have, that in America, we settle our differences at the ballot box. I thought the Senate, in its infinite wisdom, would have the strength to convict him, but they didn't. And it was only after the Senate refused to do what I felt was their job, is to convict Donald Trump. This lawsuit is another opportunity.
Joining our conversation, Chuck Rosenberg, a former U.S. attorney who worked on the staffs of both Robert Mueller and Jim Comey at the FBI, and Jason Johnson, journalism and politics professor at Morgan State University and a contributor to the GRIA. Lucky for us, both MSNBC contributors. Chuck Rosenberg, let me start with you. Do they have a case?
They do have a case, Nicole. It's an interesting case. It invokes a very old statute, one passed in 1871 at the request of then-President Ulysses S. Grant. Federal officials in the South were being terrorized. Sound familiar? By racist groups, including the KKK. In fact, it was known colloquially as the Ku Klux Klan Act because it was designed to prevent groups like the KKK from hindering federal officials in doing their work. Sound familiar? And so I don't know how this is going to look at the end of the day, but interestingly, the complaint, it's a civil lawsuit, tracks a lot of the proof that the House managers adduced at the Senate impeachment trial. I find it pretty compelling. I think it's thoughtfully composed. Whether or not it works in the end, it's going to make life pretty uncomfortable for the Proud Boys and the Oath Keepers and Rudy Giuliani and perhaps even former President Trump.
Jason Johnson, let me show you some of the evidence they have to work with.
This is a fraud on the American public. This is an embarrassment to our country.
The number of voter fraud cases in Philadelphia could fill a library.
It's a theft of an election, and it was carried out by the same method in the city of Detroit.
But you can't ever accept when they steal and rig and rob. Can't accept it.
Let's have trial by combat.
We won this election, and we won it by a landslide. And if you don't fight like hell, you're not going to have a country anymore.
The conduct that the people in the audience engaged in is now known the world over, as is Donald Trump and Rudy Giuliani's instruction to their supporters. How do you think the president's own words and Rudy's own words will influence this lawsuit?
Well, Nicole has a great influence because it shows a long pattern of calling for violence. And really, you know, some of Trump's most violent language was even before he became president. 2015, 2016, you see him saying he wanted to punch people and that he would pay for people to beat somebody up who was protesting at a rally if they threw a tomato. So we already have a long history of Trump and his associates calling for violence. But I think what's important about this case, and it's fitting, hey, this is Black History Month, it's American History Month, is that the law that they're calling upon, the 1871 KKK Act, the country, after the Civil War, was racked with violence. You had the Colfax Massacre, which was like over 100 black people, elected officials, got killed. You had the Wilmington Insurrection in 1898. The law was passed to prevent violence that everybody knew was coming. So if this law can be applied now to anticipate the violence that we've already seen to prevent future death, it seems like a really good idea. The issue is going to be, one, since it's civil, what court will it end up being in, what kind of jurisdiction is going to be applied, and then ultimately what the consequences are. If the end result just ends up being financial, that Rudy Giuliani is bankrupted or Donald Trump has to spend a lot of money, I would say that's not the most satisfying result, but it makes sense because the Southern SCLC, lots of other organizations have taken out white nationalist groups, not by throwing them in jail, but by bankrupting them. So if that ends up being the result here, this might be an effective first step.
We can't grow numb to the fact that we're talking about action that was done in concert with, I hate to use the word collusion, I'm scarred by the Mueller investigation, but this was Donald Trump and Rudy Giuliani working with white supremacists. I feel like that can never become normal. And Donald Trump telling the Proud Boys to stand back and stand by, sure, it created a backlash and outrage, but Donald Trump never really walked it back. Donald Trump has never condemned any of these groups by name. Neither have most of the House Republicans, who the New York Times reported them to be associated with, 6 of them. Where are we heading, Chuck Rosenberg, when you've got this symbiotic relationship between violent militias, white supremacists, and Republicans?
Well, as a nation, I think we're heading to a very difficult, dangerous, and dark place. I mean, however, we're also heading to court. And to Jason's point, he's absolutely right. A number of numerous groups have used civil laws of the United States to go after these racist groups. And if, like he said, we only bankrupt them, that's not a bad thing. Look, here's what folks have to remember. To bring a criminal case, you generally need a sovereign, either the state or federal government. There's a few minor exceptions to that. But generally speaking, a sovereign brings a criminal case, and we do that to incapacitate people, to put them in jail as punishment. But here, this is a very clever use of an old statute, a civil statute, that gives a private individual, in this case, Benny Thompson, as a member of Congress, the power to go after these racist groups. And so, where are we going as a nation? It scares the hell out of me, Nicole. But where they're going is to court. This is where they ought to be, whether it's civil or criminal or both. I think, as Jason said, this is a good thing because it's a way to hold people accountable. What Benny Thompson is seeking is really 3 things. Money is one of them. But he's also seeking a declaratory judgment from the court. A simple declaration that they, in fact, Giuliani, Trump, the Proud Boys, and the Oath Keepers did what Thompson alleged they did, interfering with his job as a member of Congress in certifying the vote. He wants a declaratory judgment. He also wants an injunction, preventing them from ever doing something like this again. So if we have to do it civilly, case by case, group by group, individual by individual, racist by racist, so be it.
I hear you, but Jason Johnson, if we're at a place in this country where making clever use of a law that's literally called the 1871 KKK Act to deal with Donald Trump, it just underscores what a colossal failure every other avenue has been.
Oh, I completely agree, Nicole. We wouldn't be here if you didn't have so many complicit cops at the Capitol. Let's be honest. We're still investigating that. We wouldn't be here if you didn't have so many people who I still think will probably be exposed in Congress for having participated in this. But I think the value, given the weaknesses in our criminal justice system, I mean, how many different people have we seen who were caught at the riots, at the insurrection, beating cops, gouging out eyes, saying that they wanted to kill Nancy Pelosi, who've been allowed to walk so far, or walking around their own recognizance. If we have a criminal justice system that will not hold these people accountable by throwing them in jail, at least we can get into their pockets. And as far as I'm concerned, if I can bankrupt a racist, I can deal with that for now if I can't jail a racist. And I think that a lot of people are going to end up being bankrupt. Because here's the other tricky thing, Nicole. So if the Proud Boys end up getting caught up in this case, where are they going to get their money from? All these different organizations that have tried to funnel money to the Proud Boys and the Oath Keepers, they're not going to want to be anywhere near them. GoFundMe is not going to let a white nationalist group raise money, right? They got rid of Kyle Rittenhouse. So it's going to starve these organizations in ways and expose those who've been trying to help them under the cover of night for the last 5-6 years.